Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Firebase After Hours, where we talk about stuff and have guests. And before we get into it, quick review of our code of conduct. We're in the Firebase community. Let's be excellent to each other. So if you have any questions, you can use the live stream chat to send us your questions. We'll be monitoring this, and we'll try to answer your questions throughout the next couple of minutes. The stream will last for roughly about 1 hour. If we run slightly over, I think that's fine, but we try to stay within the 1 hour window. Ask us your questions. Let's be excellent to each other. And I already see a bunch of people commenting on the chat. So tell us where you're from on this planet. We love seeing where our users are from and where Firebase is being used. I see people from India, Pakistan, Brooklyn. Hello, hello. And with that, let's bring on all the other people that we'll be talking to today. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon.
We've got Nathan, Chris, and of course, none other than Nohe. So I thought maybe we can go around the room and you can briefly introduce yourselves, what you do at Firebase, and then I have one more question once we've gone through the room. So Nathan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. Hello. My name is Nathan Yim. I'm a product manager on the Firebase team, and I specifically work on Gemini in Firebase, which is using AI assistants to help make developers more productive. I'm joining you from Seattle, Washington right now, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Thanks. Chris?
Hello, my name is Chris Thompson. I am a software engineer at Google working on Gemini and Firebase, and so I'm joining you from Sunnyvale, California.
Amazing. And Nohe?
Yeah, I'm a DevRel engineer in Mountain View. I just do stuff on Firebase.
Cool. And I'm Peter. I'm a developer advocate on the Firebase team. I also do stuff with Firebase, and I'm based in Hamburg. So one more question before we talk about Gemini and Firebase, and that is, what is your favorite programming language, and why is it TypeScript? No. And how many spaces do you indent? Let's do the same round. Nathan.
Ooh, okay. I'm just gonna go with C# because I love video games and I like making little games in Unity. And let's say, I'll throw a little bit of chaos into the mix, and I'll say, let's go with tabbing.
Oh wow! Okay, but how many white spaces would you set as your tab width?
Okay, let's say 4.
Okay, cool. Chris?
So originally I might have said Java. Lately I've really been enjoying Python after they added the type annotations. I think Python has become a really great language to kind of code in, to read much better now. And let's see, my tab. I started off with eight spaces. I've taken that back a little bit. Now it's mostly 2 because that's what Google standard is. But yeah, 2 is my latest.
Wow, 8 spaces. That is a lot. Yeah, Nohe, what about you?
So I like Go, and I just do whatever the default is. But if I change whatever the default is, it's generally 2 spaces because then I can read it on my phone when I'm in bed. So like sometimes I'll answer Stack Overflow like while I'm laying in bed trying to like fall asleep. I haven't done it in a while, but then I can actually read my code that I committed to GitHub because it'll all fit on one screen.
I'm not your manager. If I was, I would probably tell you that's a very unhealthy work ethic, though.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to chime in the chat in a minute.
I'm not, and I'm not much better than you, to be honest. So my favorite language is Swift, as people will probably not be very surprised to hear. And just like Chris, I'm down to 2 spaces for indentation. after having used 3 spaces for indenting for a very, very long time. Yeah, it always surprises me, but I think it was 3 spaces. I think that's what I did in the past. So I think we're a bunch of crazy people with our tab widths here. Yeah, so people on the stream, if you like, tell us what your favorite languages are and your indentation. But with that out of the way, let's talk about Gemini in Firebase. So maybe to start us off, Nathan, you're the product manager. Can you give us the elevator pitch? Like, what is it? And why do we call everything Gemini?
Well, I'll answer the first part first, and the second one we'll see if we can unpack that a little bit. But Gemini and Firebase really is AI assistance in the Firebase console, and you can really think of it like a Firebase expert that's at your side at every stage of your development process. And so whether you're designing your app, when you're developing it, when you're optimizing it, or when you're troubleshooting it and debugging your errors in your app, it's really there to help answer your questions. It can provide sample code. It can help explain code to you. And so I like to think of it like I have Nohe sitting kind of right next to me where I can just ask questions, and he always kind of seems to know the answer to them.
But he's also, a very funny guy who likes to throw you off. So, as I said, I never know if he's pulling my leg. I hope that Gemini is not doing that.
That's true. Yeah, a little less leg pulling, I'd say, with Gemini.
Okay. Yeah, I recently tried it out when I needed to do something, and I went into the chat window and I asked it something. Oh, it was about GenKit. Yeah. So I wanted to do something in GenKit, and I went in and I was really surprised by the code it threw back at me, because it was correct. It did what I asked it for, and it even compiled. So, and that with GenKit being a super new product with not a lot of material to go on about. So, yeah, can you explain a little bit how it works, and how we teach it what Firebase is, and where the limits are, and how is it more specific maybe than if we went into Gemini, the chat application.
Right. Yeah, so Gemini and Firebase uses kind of the base Gemini model that kind of all of Google uses. But on top of that, we leverage what's called RAG to use kind of specific Firebase data to help kind of tune that model. And so this is Firebase information like docs, it's sample code, it's even kind of the YouTube videos that we put out with great documentation and great content on Firebase to help it have that extra level of understanding, if you will, about Firebase products and Firebase services and code. And so with that tuning, we're able to help Gemini and Firebase kind of offer that more specific insight into Firebase problems that people are having. Chris, was there anything that I'm missing there?
No, I think you nailed it. Yeah, it's we bring kind of the full information set from Google into Gemini, and to improve all the responses we get. Yep.
I also wanted to add that we do want to have it as up to date as possible as well. And so when we're pulling in this information, it is fresh information. I think the lag time is very short. And so when we do publish new docs, when we publish more information about new products like GenKit, for example, it is a goal to have that be picked up by RAG very quickly, so that it's never really out of date.
I have a ton of questions about how it's implemented, but before we dive into that, maybe we can show people how it looks like. And I believe you've brought some demos that we can show. So maybe, Chris, I'll hand it over to you to show some of that and take the steering wheel.
Sure. Let me pull up a window here. All right. How does that look? This is our console view. So I guess the first thing you're presented with, let's go to kind of the project overview page. And the Gemini window is accessible from the icon on the right here. It pops up from the right side. And you can kind of There's some starter questions here. How to get started on Firebase, remote config, these kinds of things. Or I can ask it any question that I want, like, how can I get started with maybe, let's say Firestore.
Hey, Chris, could you make your screen a little bit bigger, like Command plus or something?
Yep. How's that?
You kind of want it unreadable locally, but yeah, there we go. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's great. Excellent. Yeah, so on the right side here, we have how can I get started with Firestore, and then I'll get some instructions on setting up my development environment, initializing Firestore. I haven't vetted this information specifically, so yes. What else is interesting? We have, I was just discussing with Nathan, we have the addition of these contextual entry points. So if you're in a particular experience, you might see this, we call it a pill, I guess. You can click here and go right into the Gemini experience as well. So you don't have to necessarily go from the right side.
Yeah, and really the point of these entry points is to make sure that Gemini can help you at any stage of your development, whatever your context is in the Firebase console. You might be, for example, working on Firestore and have a question, hey, like, how do I bring Firestore into my app? And that's where kind of these entry points are really helpful in getting to Gemini very quickly.
So I have a question for y'all. If I see like some JavaScript samples popping up, is there a Dart sample or a Flutter sample that you could try instead?
Sure. Let's try, let's say, my preferred language. Let's see if it regenerates the answer. Oops. Okay. We'll say, answer the question above with the Dart context. Okay. I'm just going to copy the question again in case I forgot. So Gemini does have the full conversation history, but sometimes it behaves however it likes. Let's see here. Okay, perfect. So let's look at this. This looks a little closer to, okay, and inferred that we're using Flutter. So here's some installation instructions. And just our DB connection. It looks Flutter-esque, although I haven't.
We haven't tried it. Yeah,
I haven't tried it.
It does look Flutter-esque.
And of course, we have our additional reading there. Cool.
I would say one cool thing is that it should be able to answer questions about any language that Firebase supports as well. And so, you asked for a Dart sample, but whether you're working in Swift or in Kotlin or in Java or in JavaScript, et cetera, it should be able to answer and provide code samples and code explanations for those specific languages. Mm-hmm. Another cool thing is that there's some knowledge about your project that Gemini and Firebase knows. And so, for example, if you have an Android app registered with your Firebase project, it'll tend to provide code samples in Kotlin or Java to match the app that you have registered there as well. And so there's these little things that it knows about you, these little contextual clues that it can use to help personalize that experience for you as well.
But it does not know about my data model in Firestore, for example. So if I said, can you look at the so-and-so collection and generate a Swift struct for me so I can map from my database into the struct, that's not something that it can do, or can it?
That's correct. So I'd say today it can't do that. I think we're always looking at ways to help Gemini and Firebase be more personalized and be more relevant to people's queries. We find that a lot of the time people, when they try out Gemini and Firebase, they have the assumption that, hey, it knows kind of everything about my project. And so we want to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. That said, we also are very, very cognizant of privacy and user data. And so we want to make sure that as we roll out kind of features and that deeper level of contextualization, that people know exactly how their data is being used and how they have control over its use as well.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that one of the challenges is that in a NoSQL database, we don't have a schema to look at. So for example,
Yeah.
if you're looking at Firebase Data Connect as a contrast, Firebase Data Connect comes with a schema, so the model can understand the structure of the database without looking at the data, whereas in Firestore and real-time database, it's required to look at the data itself in order to understand the structure, or in order to infer the structure of the storage. So that's something that we're gonna have to work through, but yeah.
And then Nathan, I think earlier you mentioned that it has very fresh data brought to it, and I think you were at I/O this year. How much of the I/O announcements made it into this version of Gemini that we interact with? Could we ask a question about Data Connect or?
Yeah, I want to say that we should that should be in. Like when I say it's very fresh, I think that period of time is like less than a week. And so we can give it a try. We can try to ask some questions about Data Connect and see. I think one thing we might find also is over time as the content corpus grows, the answers just get better and they get more, I guess, more fleshed out. And so if there's just say one page of documentation, you can imagine the quality or the accuracy not being totally at its peak, but over time, as content continues to grow there, then the quality of responses also continues to improve.
Yeah, this looks really good right here with the private preview and everything about that. At the bottom, Chris, there's a section I saw that says show related content. Does that take you straight to the docs?
Yes. Well, actually, this is some of the data that it's some of the content that is pulled in from its grounding sources. So looks like right now it's so one of the things about FTC is there's very limited documentation online. It's not a mature product. It's still I think we're private preview. And so given the limited amount of documentation publicly, so then we have some redundant links here. But this will take me to the Data Connect landing page, and I can go from here.
Gotcha.
So on a related note, we had a question on the live stream. So Jeremy here asks, how do I query a Postgres database using my Flutter app using Data Connect? So that seems very topical. Can we try asking that question and see what we get?
Sure. The first question I have, I apologize, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I don't know if we have Flutter SDKs just yet. I could be wrong, and I might get an angry message later, but I think I'm just looking at the docs here. I think we're limited to probably Kotlin, Swift, and some TypeScript. But we could definitely create a Postgres database and connect to it via some Android native code or something like this. Let's see. What should we ask it? How can I?
Yeah, let's see if it tells us that there is no Dart SDK.
Sure, let's start with that.
Looking at Nathan and to see if he's getting nervous.
Sweat dripping down my face.
Connect to. Let's just say Dart app. Let's see if it gets that.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah. Not bad, not bad.
Good job, Gemini. I'm just going to see if there's already a note about Postgres here. No? Maybe the search is. Oh, interesting. It calls it Cloud Functions for Firebase. We similarly don't have an admin SDK for FTC, so.
Yeah. So it seems to be grounded now in the fact that we did ask about Flutter, and all the questions will go to deflect us
Yeah.
from trying to use that, right? So and that that leads into an interesting question. How much context does it keep, right? So now we're in this chat, and I assume that everything that we will say in this chat refers back to everything that we did say in this chat. But so 2 questions here. How can we reset the context? So for example, if we said, oh, I made a mistake, I don't want to use Flutter, I want to use Kotlin. And then the other question, basically the same, is when will it lose context, right? So let's say I've built this very long chat and I've used it to help me build out an amazing feature, and then the power goes out, my computer goes out, and then I have to reconnect once my battery is recharged. I come back, and is everything gone, or is the context still there?
So I'll kick it over to Nathan on that one. Yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
All right, sure. Yeah, I'll say first off, great questions. Like I think when it comes to how to reset context, I think there's a couple of tactics you can employ. One is simply but just talking to Gemini like you would talk to a person, to ask it, hey, like instead of this language, I want to use this language, and it should be able to pick up on that and start using that moving forwards. Another, a bit more brute force way to do it would be clearing the conversation. And so you see that little trash can icon at the top of the chat, and once you do that, it's kind of like a fresh canvas where you can start a new conversation with Gemini. And I don't believe it'll take context for your previous conversations when you're doing that. In terms of the question around if the power goes out, do I lose context? I believe the answer today is yes. It would not retain that context or that previous chat history. But this is a piece of user feedback that we have heard before, and so I can't make any commitments or promises. But we understand that is a pain point for folks, and is something that I think we would like to solve in the future as well.
I know of a really good document DB that's like very close to real time that we could use to store conversations and context in, if you're interested.
Oh yeah, well we'll have to chat.
Yeah, ask Gemini how to implement that.
I love it.
Are there any, so my next question would be, is there any way to persist the conversation and reload it? And if not, is that a feature that you would entertain, or do you think, oh no, that's not useful?
Yeah, so right now, no way to persist the conversation. And just to get a little bit into the weeds of how this is built as well, we're building Gemini and Firebase on top of a platform that's provided by GCP, and they power Gemini experiences both in the Google Cloud Console, in the IDE as well. And so lots of the features that we're implementing here, we need to be supported kind of on that platform level. And so it's a partnership and a collaboration with GCP to build out these things. And I think it's one of those situations where both Firebase and GCP, we know that chat history and persistent chat is something that developers want and would be helpful. And now it's just a matter of figuring out, hey, like, how do we do this? How do we make sure that this works from a privacy and data retention standpoint, and obviously from a technical implementation standpoint as well.
Yeah, cool. Let's take a look at some other questions that people have. All right. Okay, so this might be related. So Carlos asks, I would like to know how to work with a team of developers if I am the account owner. So that is a very broad and generic question. I mean, we could spin this any way we wanted, but in the context of the conversation that we've just had. So let's say I'm an agency. I have a development team of a couple of folks who are working on the same project. What's the best way to collaborate when you are using Gemini and Firebase on your projects, and also, what happens if you have a production project, a testing and a staging project, and all of that.
I think maybe there's like a couple different approaches we can take to this question. I'd say the first one is just like explaining how access works for Gemini and Firebase, how you can actually start using it. And so I don't know, Chris, if you want to pull up like the users and permissions setting page in a Firebase project. But essentially, to be able to use Gemini and Firebase, you need to have the Cloud AI Companion API permission enabled. And that can be granted to folks, I think, by the project owner as well. I don't know if you click onto your...
Yeah.
I think owner definitely probably in for...
so here's yeah, so it's worth calling out that any owners or editors of a Firebase project will have access to that Cloud AI Companion API. But if you click select roles as well, you'll see that there's a checkbox for Cloud AI Companion user too. And so say you have folks with kind of a lesser permissions on your project, you can still grant them access to be able to use Gemini and Firebase here as well. So kind of as like the project owner, that's kind of how you would manage access for folks on your team with Gemini and Firebase. In terms of working across your team using Gemini and Firebase, I'd say today, Gemini and Firebase doesn't necessarily have that shared context across the project. And so it's really more so one-on-one conversations. And so maybe a mental model would be if, if I'm working on a project and I had a one-on-one phone call with Nohe, but Chris is working on the same project, but he had a one-on-one phone call with Peter. Right? And so Nohe and Peter aren't talking to each other, but they're talking to kind of us one-on-one. They have a similar level of knowledge about the project and context about it. But it's a great question, though, because I think it really brings up, what like the use cases that developers will have in the Firebase console, and what could be helpful. And so I really appreciate hearing that question.
Yeah, maybe it's something that I, as a user, want to decide, right? So some questions I want to ask in a one-on-one capacity, and some questions I want to ask so that the rest of the team can benefit from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's see if there are more questions. Another one from Carlos. Can Gemini guide me to create a CI/CD pipeline with Firebase?
That's a great question. I think should we try it out? See how it works?
Yeah, let's try it.
I'd also say, like, for the viewers out there as well, feel free to in your own Firebase projects try out Gemini and Firebase. I'd say that right now it is in a promotional period, and so you will not be charged for Gemini and Firebase usage. And so you feel free to give it a shot, ask it your questions, and see how it works for you as well.
How long does that promo period last?
So we're actually we're kind of in the midst of shaking up the dates a little bit. We are just recently, I think this week, announcing that Gemini and Firebase will be included with Gemini Code Assist, which is in a promotional period until November. Although that inclusion in Gemini Code Assist will start on September 30th. And so I'd say, you can use Gemini and Firebase kind of as is until September 30th at the latest, or the earliest. Yeah.
Yeah. So the answer to the CI/CD question, this is actually a better answer than I would have provided. Actually, we have we have information about Test Lab, which is great. App distro, absolutely. Hosting, yes. Functions, emulator suite to run your tests on submission, and then some considerations. Yeah. It looks like we don't have a whole lot of app hosting just yet, so I'll have to work on getting that in there as well.
So one of the things I always wonder, looking at the results that tools like Gemini and Firebase give me, is how elaborate is the prompt that we're using? So is this something that you can share, or is this a secret that we want to keep close to our chest? I guess my question would be, is the prompt very long? Is it dynamic? What's in the prompt?
I'd say
Yeah.
there's a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I'll just say that a little bit of everything. So some of it is proprietary. I would say it's a lot less sophisticated than you might think. I think one thing I'll point out, I think Google Workspace had a fantastic document that they put out on how to write a great prompt. So we use some of the techniques listed in there, namely, we give Gemini and Firebase a role. It's a Firebase expert. And we give it a task.
Do we tell it is Puff?
Yes, exactly. You're going to draw
That's
on
the whole prompt.
You're Puff and you're trying to amp up your Stack Overflow score.
Yes. Improves his response rate by 50%. And then we recently rolled out the contextual information. So we're going to include some information about your project, that sort of thing. And then of course your question goes at the end.
It's also something I'd say that we want to make sure we're like constantly tuning it and experimenting with the prompts that yield the best results as well. And so, what might be in that static or dynamic portion of the preamble today, might not necessarily be the same one that we're using next week.
I've pasted a link to that document that you referred to, Chris, into the chat. It's called the Prompting Guide 101, right? That's the one that you were referring to.
I believe that's the one. Yes. Yeah. From
the Google Workspace. Yeah, that's a good one.
Other than that, you can imagine we also do, as Nathan mentioned earlier, we use RAG and data grounding. So Gemini will pull in a bunch of information related to your prompt from various Google sources, high quality information, and that gets also rolled into the prompt so that the model can it gives the model a better chance at kind of getting complete and relevant and up-to-date information.
So my go-to test for checking out the quality of answers always is, can you teach me how to map data from Firestore to Swift? Because that tests on 2 dimensions. The first one being, does it suggest to use Codable and not map manually? And then the other one is, does it suggest to use async await instead of closures? And I remember that in the beginning when we were dog fooding this, it would definitely always say, all right, so here is how you can map data. And it gave me like a ton of code that basically maps manually and did use completion handlers. And I was like, no, that's not wrong, but it's not modern code. So I did use the thumbs down button quite a bit and also provided feedback. So how does that work? How does user feedback like this go into the database? If a person gets a bad answer and presses a thumbs down button, will this be reflected immediately? Is there a human review process in the middle? How does it work?
Yeah, so for the feedback buttons that exist today, it's not kind of automatically fed back into the model. So it does go to a database where a human does review it. When you do give a thumbs down response, you're also given the option to submit like your conversation history, for example. And those reports for us is super helpful. We can kind of see where Gemini has a harder time answering questions or doesn't necessarily provide the best answers. And so I would encourage folks when they do run into an answer that doesn't work for them to give that thumbs down and provide that feedback to us. And so that feedback loop is a little more manual today, where we look at the kind of prompt and the answer that it gave and said, okay, we need the model to understand a little bit more about this data model or this language or this scenario, and then we fix it that way. On the
How
flip
would
side,
you,
if
sorry,
you have,
sorry for interjecting. How would you
no,
do
please.
that? So let's say the user sends feedback, and then we look at it and say, oh, we need to teach the model more about modern ways to use async await. How does that work?
Chris, you might have a better answer to this than me, but I think it would come down to, hey, like we need better material that covers this as well. We can also add, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can actually add examples of these things kind of directly into our RAG corpus. And so we could say, hey, here's a good example of what you should kind of respond with in this kind of scenario. And then that point onwards, it should be able to pick up on that good example and answer better in the future.
And probably also deprioritize the bad code snippets or outdated
Exactly,
ones.
yeah.
Chris, could you also show us the thumbs up and thumbs down button? I realize that I've just been walking to your desk. Oh, look at that. They're right there.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. We could add retrieval augmented generation data so that it improves the results. One of the challenges we have seen is that given just kind of the massive size of the data corpus it uses, there is outdated data. So for example, if you look at our latest video that we put out, there was the Angular ng4 and ngIf. It's not the latest idiomatic way to write Angular. And so these things they're not deprecated, they're not going away, but there's some newer kind of constructs that you can use. And so Gemini defaulted to kind of the more established ways rather than using the up-to-date. And that's likely because, we have data going back years and years versus the new if, annotations are, in the last year or two. I believe that's the case. Let me fact check myself. Actually, I'm going to use Gemini to fact check me.
Did you also recently work with Mark to update the Angular bits?
Yes, we did. We did work with Mark Thompson. You mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He pointed this out as well, I think. Okay, it is not related to Firebase. It's okay.
Will Gemini answer non-related Firebase questions? Like if I ask it, like, what's the weather in Chicago, or like, what's the average temperature in Baltimore? Will it answer that?
We could test it. There is a relevancy filter. So if the relevancy gets like super low, it'll say, I don't know about that. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Let's see. A little sassy. Okay.
Does Gemini have a preference for DevRel? Like if you say, like, who is your favorite DevRel presenter? Will it say Peter?
Let's try that next. Yeah, so there's the relevancy. It doesn't answer questions unrelated. Let's see. Let's just keep it open. Okay.
Oh, it doesn't want to show favorites. I think that's the problem.
We had two other questions from folks on the chat about code quality. So Jeremy asked, how do you know that the answers are true from Gemini? Will it ever make stuff up or take drugs or hallucinate, I guess? And then Nick asks, how's the code quality? I'm a React Native developer and I would like to use React Query plus Firebase SDKs. Does it have updated info on React Query to create modern code? I guess these are, well, roughly around how is the code quality, but also what about other frameworks that we might not cover in our documentation? Will the model be able to produce code for that?
Yeah, I'd say first piece on code quality, I'd say that it does correlate with, again, it goes back to the training data in the corpus that it uses to generate its responses. And so for for languages and situations where there's a lot of documentation on it, the quality you can generally expect to be higher. So I'd say the short answer is your mileage may vary. I would always recommend kind of double checking the code that you get from Gemini as well. I'd say like even if it's not perfectly syntactically correct, generally it'll be able to give you a good direction of where your code should go. I don't know, Chris, you've had more experience actually using it for coding as well. Do you have any kind of little tidbits of wisdom to share in terms of code quality?
I would say the more information you give it, the better. So the more specific the prompt is, the better the result you're going to get generally. Sometimes it'll generate you. There's a couple of different ways. So like, for example, you can use a conversational style. So for example, I'll ask for something. You'll see in the video that we just released, I asked for how do I connect to my Firestore database in Angular and TypeScript, and it gave me a solution using RxJS. I didn't want to use RxJS at that moment, so I just asked a follow-up question. Can you remove RxJS from this answer? And it gives me a different code snippet without RxJS. And then finally, I would say, even if the response is not, oftentimes Gemini can make mistakes with syntax, like small details, but the structure might be generally correct. So you can copy it in, tweak some things. I know, for example, in my experience, Gemini has a difficult time, like for example, in IDX with project structure. There might be a prompting or context issue, but essentially it doesn't do well with importing different modules from other parts of the project, and so you can help it out with that and do the imports that way.
Mm-hmm. To the second question, or sorry, Peter, did
No.
I was going to say, yeah, on frameworks as well. Like I think I haven't tested this extensively myself, but I think it will do a decent job of answering in at least frameworks that have like a Firebase SDK associated with it. And so React Native, I think would be able to get decent results from Gemini and Firebase. Don't quote me on that, but I would recommend giving it a try and seeing how it works for you.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm here, I guess let me point out something interesting. So for example, one of the things you might encounter is that depending on where you access Gemini from, you'll have different there's a different context, get different contextual information that's being given to Gemini. So for example, if I ask it a question here, so let me ask it a question about the Firebase CLI. And you'll see here we have some specific information about switching between projects here. This is one particular example, but it knows my project ID versus if I go over to IDX here, let me take a look. For example, if I'm looking at my app component and ask Gemini the same question, let me copy that. So in this context, it doesn't have the project ID information fed to it because it's looking currently at this app component TypeScript file. Versus if I do something like switch over to my config and I ask it the same question, I'm going to open a new window. Oh, not quite. So I wanted it to pick up this my project ID CT Angular here. Let's say it's more direct. In this context, it should be able to find my project ID.
It's impossible for me to know.
Oh, it's not cooperating right now. Okay. But conceptually, it has visibility on this window that I have open, and so it should be able to tell me what my project ID is.
Yeah, that's good to know. On a related note, let's say I'm in the console and then I ask it something about, I don't know, how do I implement authentication? And then it tells me how to do that. And then can I do stuff like, please take me to the authentication page and activate anonymous authentication for me and stuff like that? Or, at least take me there?
That's another great question, and I feel like you're a mind reader, because this is something that is not supported today, but it's something we are working on as well. And so there's this concept of agentic AI experiences that essentially is where Gemini or AI systems are able to take action on your behalf. And so while Gemini and Firebase doesn't support these necessarily today, it is a direction that we want to go towards. And the first step is these kind of navigational links, if you will, in the chat. And so that's something that we are currently working on and should be launching soon. And exactly like the example you just mentioned, if you say, hey, I want to add authentication to my app, Gemini will be able to respond with instructions and a link that'll take you to the right page in the console. And so that's kind of one baby step towards those further agentic experiences. And you can imagine in the future, wanting through the chat experience or through some other interface, being able to actually like enable that Firebase product for your project without having to go through all the regular setup or steps. So a direction that we're headed in, and one that we're really, really excited about, because I think that's where a lot of the real value is really going to shine through these experiences that really cut down on the amount of time and effort and energy that you need to spend kind of doing setup or these manual tasks in the Firebase console or elsewhere. So great question, and yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that.
Good to know.
Will it give me opinions about like how to structure data? So let's say I have an app and I'm building a knowledge base app that indexes every Wikipedia article in the world or something like that, right? Will it give me opinions on how to structure my Firestore document database or my Data Connect database, or will it kind of say like hands off, like that's on you to figure out?
I think it should be able to give you, an educated opinion. Part of what makes Gemini and Firebase so helpful is that it can offer recommendations as well. And as part of the training data corpus that it uses, that includes best practices. And so it should have a sense of what is the direction to go in. Should I use RTDB or should I use Firestore for this? If you ask it, I want to say that it should be able to provide that kind of opinionated response.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so this is kind of the result. I'm just kind of reading through it here, but it's giving me this data model. Of course, Firestore doesn't have a schema, so it's just kind of just like a NoSQL model. But so pages, document ID, links. Oh, this is the second one. Okay, so this is basically okay. We'll have to test it out to make sure it passes muster. How many Wikipedia pages do we have now? Probably a billion.
Probably.
On the data modeling aspect, there was a question on chat where Ahmed asked when Gemini will interact with Firestore data. So I think the one part where we can use Gemini and Firebase to reason about the data model that we have in the Firestore data browser. I think we talked about this before. So because it doesn't have a schema, that's not very feasible. So and it's currently not possible. But to spin this question a different way, we could talk about how can you use Gemini to connect to data that you have in your application, right? So, and that leads into why do we call everything Gemini, right? So I guess if we look at it this way, you could use data in your Firestore instance and use that as input data to your RAG data flow to to implement use cases that need access to the data that you've got stored about your users or maybe your product catalog, and then make a call to Gemini using either the Google AI SDK or the Vertex SDK, right? So that is the, if you will, the developer/consumer perspective, and not the how to use Gemini and Firebase in the console perspective.
I think this goes back a little bit to the kind of the contextual data piece and like what Gemini, what does it know about your project? So that's one of those things where, in terms of the actual data in your Firestore DB, today it doesn't have access to that data, but that is a direction that we want to explore and are very interested in looking at. Totally get the value and the use cases of that. And if Gemini could understand kind of exactly what this data looks like, you could just imagine like how relevant those answers will be, and all kind of future prompts will be. And so that's not something that is available today, but definitely something we're interested in exploring further. In terms of like why everything is called Gemini, I think it's kind of funny. Like definitely above our pay grades when it comes to kind of the marketing that Google decides when it comes to our AI and Gemini. But really, at the end of the day, I think it's because these are all based on these foundational Gemini models, that are made by Google DeepMind and all these people who are smarter than I am. And I think because they're all kind of based on these same foundational models, they all kind of share that heritage, if you will. And that's maybe a shallow answer, but that's to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, if you remember, like 6 months ago or a year ago, we had Vertex AI, we had Duet AI, we had some various other services, and people were it's the opposite problem, right? People are like, I'm confused on what are all these different different we call them surfaces, and why are they all named differently? So then Nathan's right, they're using the same underlying architecture, the same foundational models. So we just aligned on kind of one naming convention, so we keep things consistent and simple and understandable.
Yep. Naming is hard.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's take another look at questions from the stream. Okay, Carlos. I have a project with the Blaze plan activated. Right now, that project is not in motion. Once I release the project to public, how is it going to be processing my billing account? And then Gemini is a monthly pay. I guess that's a question.
Yeah. So great question as well. Just to clarify kind of how billing will work for Gemini. And so, like I mentioned before, Gemini is currently in a promotional period, and so you can use it at no charge. But when it does when that promotional period does end, and billing will be required, or a subscription will be required for Gemini, that's never going to just kind of turn on because you have a Blaze account. And so you will explicitly need to purchase a separate subscription to Gemini in order to be billed for it. And so I'd say there's no need to worry about kind of an unexpected bill coming up from Gemini just from having it enabled for your project today. And that's something that you will have kind of explicitly gone through that purchase flow to enable that subscription.
And is that based on a per project level, or is it tied to a user account?
So for, I think in the short term, it is on like a project level. So if there's a project that has a billing account that has purchased a license, so take Gemini Code Assist, for example, which does have like a license that can be purchased today. The way that works today is that if your project has a billing account associated with it that has a license, then that project is by all accounts that's subscribed to Gemini or to Gemini Code Assist. In the future, we are moving to a license-based system, or you can imagine it like seats. And so it would be you purchase X number of licenses or X number of seats, and those are assigned to specific users. And once a user has a seat assigned to them, they can use it across any project that they have access to.
Okay, that makes sense.
And Nathan, this do we have a new date to share for the promotional period ending? I think this is a little bit out of date. I don't know if we have a specific date we can share.
Yeah, this one, as you can see, August 30th, that's coming up, I think this week, and so very soon. And so we are, and I think we're in the process of updating this right now, actually. But Gemini and Firebase will, on September 30th, start to be included with Gemini Code Assist. And so you can imagine this date, being extended by a month from what you see. And after that point, it'll be subject to, all the terms of use and the promotional period of Gemini Code Assist. And Gemini Code Assist itself is also in a promotional period, but it's a little different. So it's available to use at no cost until November 8th, but that is limited to 1 user per billing account. And so the difference being that organizations will be expected to purchase a license in order to use it. And then November 8th is when kind of the promotional period will end for all.
So is there a gap between August 30th and September 30th, or is there no gap?
No gap. So you can imagine that just being, it existing as is, where you can use it at no cost in the Firebase console, Gemini Firebase, I mean, until September 30th, which you will still be able to use it as an individual, but organizations would be expected to pay for that license.
Okay.
All right. Were there any topics, any features that we didn't talk about and that you absolutely did want to show or talk about?
Yes, there's one other that we haven't talked about at all today, but I think it's a really important part of Gemini and Firebase. And so far today, we've really only talked about the chat experience in the Firebase console. And I'd say that's actually just one piece of Gemini and Firebase. And really, when we think about the goals of this product, it's to increase developer productivity. It's to kind of reduce toil, and chat is one way to do it when you're talking to this Firebase expert. But there are other more integrated experiences that we can light up throughout the developer workflow and throughout the Firebase console. And so one example of this is with Crashlytics, and we have a feature integration where if you're looking at one of your crashes or your ANRs, you'll actually be able to get a Gemini generated summary of that crash, along with recommendations for how to fix it, potential steps to reproduce that crash, some sample code that can help you fix that issue. And when you're thinking of, when you're debugging your app, sometimes, the logs can be very confusing. The stack trace can be long and a little overwhelming. And so having something that can kind of explain that issue to you in natural language, hopefully will save developers a lot of time. And so I'd say that's kind of one example of a feature integration that we have already launched. But, we're looking across the entire suite of Firebase products and services and saying, hey, where are the places where developers could use assistance kind of built into the experience itself. So really excited about that aspect of Gemini and Firebase, and really want to make sure that when we're talking about Gemini and Firebase as well, it's not just like a chat bot in the console. It's really integrated into the whole flow to help you make and optimize your app. I don't know if we have, if on Chris's test account, I don't think he has access to a project with Crashlytics on it right now. So we might not be able to show it necessarily.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a demo prepped on that one, but.
Or you just don't have any crashes, right? Because you write really good
code. Yeah.
It's perfect code.
Every time.
Did you talk about it in the video that you posted recently?
We did, yeah. So at the end of the video that we posted, we do talk about and show that Crashlytics experience. And so if we could plug that as well, and folks who check that out, I think that'd be awesome. But yeah, that's an exciting one. And we work really closely with the Crashlytics team on that as well to make sure that the quality is there and the training data is all there. And yeah, if you have crashes or if you have Crashlytics in your app, please feel free to try it out and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear how people are using it and how well it's working for folks.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that sounds super useful. I've seen a similar feature in the Cloud Log Explorer where you can ask it to explain a stack trace, and that was pretty useful, right? So instead of trying to copy out the error message, going into your favorite search engine or Stack Overflow and trying to search, what does this exception mean? It did a pretty good job at explaining what the issue was. And I imagine, once you implement more agentic flows and, give it agency to act on your behalf, then you could, I don't know, for example, I recently had a case where something didn't work because I was working on a project that was not on the Blaze plan, right? So,
right.
And that would be an easy thing to tell me, oh, you need to upgrade your billing, you need to be on the Blaze plan. Please go here, and then, have your credit card at the ready.
Absolutely.
That would be useful.
Yeah, and again, keep your eyes peeled. We have so many things in motion right now. I wish I could talk about everything, but yeah, I'm very excited about the future of Gemini and Firebase throughout the Firebase console, and also potentially beyond the console as well. We know that you don't spend 100% of your time in the console when you're making your app. There's a lot that you're doing in your IDE on other surfaces, and yeah, there's a bright future ahead for this kind of assistance, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and I see that this feature actually already exists.
Yeah, so it does understand what billing plan you're on, and then depending on the question, it can advise you on upgrading or not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Can it tell me whether or not I have auth activated in the providers I have?
Oh,
sorry, I realize
yeah.
we're over time. I'm just curious.
Currently, it can't do that. That's something that we might add in the future.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, great. So it seems like we need to have you on again, like maybe in the next quarter or in two, to talk about all the amazing, cool new things that you've integrated into the console and all the other surfaces. Would it be feasible to add Gemini into the CLI? Would that be an interesting use case?
Yeah, I think, if there's demand for it, and if developers would find that helpful, then I think there is a path forward there as well. Obviously, we need to prioritize it against everything else that we're working on. But yeah, again, let us know like what the use cases are. What developers in the audience what you would like to see this assistance for. I'd also like to plug quickly on the user voice. I think there's a section there for Gemini and Firebase. So if you have ideas for new features or new areas where you could use AI assistance, feel free to also add your suggestion there too.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for pulling this up, Chris.
Where we
okay, so for anybody who does not know, user voice is our forum or our system that you can use to send your feature requests and look at other feature requests that other people have submitted and then upvote them.
Very cool. Yeah, and it looks like there's not a lot of entries, so if you add one, you get plenty of attention.
Yeah, and you'll see that at the bottom there was AI assistance in the CLI, and so if that is one that you're gunning for, yeah, please give that one an upvote.
Sounds good. I will paste the link into our chat as well, so people have it for posterity. Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Nathan and Chris, for coming on and chatting with us and showing us around. I think that was super interesting. I learned a few new things, and I'm super excited to see where this is going. And hopefully there'll be a day when we can just talk to our IDEs and the console, and magic will happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having us. It's really great talking to you both, and yeah, really great to be able to share the joy and love of Gemini and Firebase with our audience here too.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nohe.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nohe, do you have any last words of
No,
wisdom?
just again, thanks for demoing all this and answering all my, silly little questions I asked throughout.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for all the questions you had. I think we answered almost all of them. So if you're watching this after the stream has concluded, go into the chat to see all the questions that people asked, and we answered them throughout the stream. So you'll have to listen to the entire thing. If you have any suggestions for topics that we should cover, people that we should invite, please feel free to drop a comment below the video, and we're happy to take this into consideration. And until then, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.